Hello and welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today's webinar is entitled Disaster Recovery in a Box. It's brought to you by Maxta, Certo, and presented by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping things you need to know about. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the GoToWebinar question box to enter your question, and we'll be having a really great, I hope really exciting Q&A session at the end of the webinar with Maxta and with Certo. Also, we have a $300 Amazon gift card to give away at the end of the webinar for one lucky attendee today. So stay tuned for that drawing. And then the last bit of housekeeping is in your GoToWebinar control panel there, you have a handouts drop down. And in that, we have some resources related to today's webinar, specifically the slides. We have a Certo solutions brief, and we also have a great Maxta book about the fundamentals of hyperconvergence. Feel free to download those and check those out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We'll get started by introducing today's speakers. Again, my name is David Davis. I'm a partner at Actual Tech Media, a 7-time VMware vExpert, author, blogger, speaker, and author of a lot of training over at pluralsight.com around VMware virtualization and cloud computing. I'm also honored to be joined today by Jennifer Gill. She's the Director of Global Product Marketing at Certo, and she's got a ton of disaster recovery knowledge to share with us and talk about some really cool things that Certo's virtual replication solution, can do for businesses. And then finally, I'm proud to be joined by Mr. Chris Darden. He's a systems engineer at Maxta, and he's here to help us learn about software-defined storage, hyperconvergence, and how Certo and Maxta's solution can work together to provide the ultimate, disaster recovery solution in a box, for businesses of all sizes. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. We've got briefly a couple poll questions here I want to ask the audience. The first poll question is just a quick demographic question. What is the size of your company? If you don't mind answering that question, that'll help us to learn a little bit more about you, to gauge future webinars, future events, and tailor these events around your needs. So I'll give it just a moment here. And looks like most everyone out there has answered the poll question. Let me go ahead and close those poll results. And as you can see, a lot of different size companies on the event today, with 50% of the attendees here being at a company who has 1,500 plus employees or more. And then a good range, spread out throughout other company sizes below that. And then one more poll question here before we jump into the webinar. Again, another easy question. Which hypervisor are you using in your data center? And I'm willing to make a bet on what the answer is going to be. All right, most everyone has voted. And as you can see, VMware vSphere at 84%, Hyper-V at 21%, KVM 9, and other hypervisors 8. So thanks so much for answering those questions. And with that, let's talk a little bit about today's topics. So I'm going to kick it off today by talking about the state of disaster recovery in the data center. I'll talk about today's disaster recovery challenge, the challenges that enterprises, IT organizations are facing, trying to prepare their company and to protect themselves, from disaster. Jennifer will then join us and talk about how virtual replication from Certo makes disaster recovery easy. And then Chris is going to discuss how the software-defined data center can really make data centers so much more simpler and more efficient. So to tell you a little bit about the state of disaster recovery, we actually did a survey at Actual Tech Media recently about disaster recovery and what IT organizations were doing. And one of the questions was, do you have a failover solution that can protect your organization from disaster, such as hurricane, tornado, or other event that results in the loss of your data center? And the answer was 52% yes and 48% no. I mean, we all know that disaster recovery is a key business need. It's not just, insurance. I mean, I guess it is a form of insurance because hopefully we never have any disasters, but it is insurance that companies really have to purchase because I'll talk in just a minute about the cost of, downtime to companies, but it's truly enormous and it can put companies, out of business. So it's a little scary out there that roughly 50% of companies don't have a failover solution that can protect themselves in the event of a data center loss. It's also, pretty telling, these statistics here that from the Contingency Planning and Strategic Research Corporation, they did a study, and it said that 96% of all business workstations are not being backed up. In IT, we try not to back up workstations for the most part, but we don't always, succeed in protecting critical company data because end users try to find a way to circumvent, the policy of keeping all data on a central, repository of some type. Another statistic here was that 30% of small businesses will experience a natural disaster. So, another pretty scary statistic there, that a third of all, small businesses will be hit with some sort of disaster. A couple more statistics here for you. 60% of companies that lose their data will shut down within 6 months after the disaster. And 93% of companies that lost their data center for 10 or more days filed for bankruptcy within a year. Based on the research that I've done from IDC, the statistic I found that was that the cost of an outage averages $20,000 per hour. And you'll see numbers, out there of all different, sizes and ranges. But no matter what, the cost of an outage is expensive. It might be difficult to put a real dollar amount on it, in some businesses, based on the type of business. But we know that, if you walk into a retail store or a restaurant and, their computer systems aren't working, we know that it immediately damages, that company's reputation. Especially in our view as IT professionals, we think, gee, why didn't they have a disaster recovery plan in place? Why weren't they prepared? And then we also have to think about our own companies. Are we prepared for, any type of disaster? So the challenges, that companies face today, to kind of, sum up what those challenges are. First off, IT organizations, they're just too busy, and disaster recovery is really at the bottom of the list in when it comes to time and funding. I mean, we have to keep our servers up to date. We have to implement new applications. We're running out of storage capacity. We're running out of storage, IOPS and throughput, and we have network bottlenecks and all these things to take care of. And disaster recovery planning and testing is typically at the bottom of the list. One is it's tough to get funding for, and two, using most technologies that we're used to using, it's tough, it's challenging, and those technologies, typically don't keep up to date with the constantly changing dynamic, data center, and so it's painful. The infrastructure and applications are changing faster than the DR plan can adapt to. The data center, in my opinion, must be less complex and that should say more efficient, actually. So we need to gain efficiencies in the data center. We need to get rid of complexities. We need to make things easier to manage, more efficient to manage, because so many of us are being pushed to, do more with less, as the saying goes, the painful saying that most all of us have heard. We need to try to find ways to do more with less, and that could be, less money, less people, less infrastructure, whatever it might be. And it's my opinion that software-defined solutions, whether it's software-defined compute, meaning hypervisor, software-defined storage, software-defined networking, they are here to help us reduce complexity, and they are really the answer, for the future. By leveraging software-defined solutions, pairing those with, lower-cost commodity-based hardware, and using virtualization, we can really do some amazing things that reduce complexity and make us, as IT administrators, so much more efficient. So, with that being said, I'd like to hand over control of the keyboard and mouse here to Jennifer from Certo, who's here to talk to us a little bit about Certo and what they can offer us in our data centers to help make disaster recovery easier and less complex. Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks so much, David. So if we take a little bit of a step back, David already outlined some of the key points around disasters. But what I find really interesting is when I start talking to customers about DR and they said, oh, we don't get hurricanes and we don't get floods and we don't have, disasters. So if you look at what actually is a disaster in terms of the data center and what causes an outage, you can see that natural disasters are way behind quite a few other things. So power failures, hardware failures, any kind of failure within the actual infrastructure itself. Humans cause errors. You get an overzealous employee who thinks they can fix something and they actually cause an impact to the data center. And then, of course, you can see natural disasters there as well, hurricanes, floods, storms, etc. So when we think about disasters, we just need to make sure that, it isn't just the hurricane that you need to protect yourself from. You need to protect yourself in many other ways as well. Oops, went one slide too far. There we go. And then if we look at the impact to a disaster, so say you have that hardware failure, or a human error, what's the most detrimental effect to your business? So in the first, you can see there, loss of employee productivity by far is the biggest impact. And then you find morale, business opportunities, and revenue, and customer confidence all kind of squished there together right around between 33 and 37%. So you can see that, one, making sure that your employees are able to continue working is very important. And then right behind there, you can lose customer confidence and revenue. So two things that we definitely want to have protected at all times. Okay, now let's take a look at Certo Virtual Replication. So our vision is to deliver a world of uninterrupted technology for businesses and people. So getting back to the data points, we want to make sure that your employees are working, that your customers are confident, and that any activities that your business is executing to generate revenue are not interrupted in any way. In Certo, when we came to market way back in 2011, one of the things that we kind of recognized in the virtual IT, so everyone's virtualizing. I saw many of you are in VMware, in Hyper-V, in KVM, etc. So you start to virtualize your environment, and you go to protect it, because if you have a mission-critical application, you want to make sure it's available so you don't impact productivity, etc. But then you're kind of force-fitting this physical replication into this virtualization environment. So you weren't able to align your virtualization strategy with your DR strategy. So replication was really in the wrong place. We have many customers who have recognized that replication is in the wrong place. So you can see we have over 2,000 enterprise customers. We work with 200 cloud service providers who build a disaster recovery as a service business with Certo, and then over 600 channel partners. Here are some logos of just our customers. None of these are partners. Okay. So with our world of uninterrupted business and IT through Certo Virtual Replication, we have one software solution that can really serve many different use cases. So the first is private cloud. So you can do replication between VMware to VMware, VMware to Hyper-V. So you're able to have kind of a mixed hypervisor environment, and you can replicate between them and between different versions. One of the things that we recognize at Certo is when you're doing an upgrade, you're probably not able to upgrade your entire infrastructure all at one time. So if you're still having, someone's on vSphere 5 and someone's on a different version, you're still able to replicate. We don't have any limitations on distance, so I have customers that are replicating from Boston to London, from Dubai to Texas, with ease, with very low impact to their business. As I mentioned, we can support disaster recovery as a service through our cloud service providers, and we do support disaster recovery to Amazon if you'd like to use Amazon as a target. Let's take a look at the architecture. So Certo installs seamlessly into your existing infrastructure. So once you've carefully configured your applications and laid everything out exactly the way that you want, you will not need to make any changes to that environment. You'll have your Certo Virtual Manager, which will install into vCenter. It's a web-based client. And then on each host within the environment, we'll install a very lightweight appliance, the Virtual Replication Appliance. We've done some benchmark testing. It's like 3 to 5% overhead on the host as a whole. There's no impact to the individual VMs. And actually, when I do this webinar with our customers, they almost always pipe in and say, we didn't even notice when Certo was installed. The overhead is very, very low. So it's ideally suited for this production environment with Certo and Maxta. It's highly scalable. When we do the replication, we do some compression, we do some throttling to make sure that we're not taking over the network. The continuous block level replication, which the VRA captures the I/O before it gets committed to storage and replicates it to the target site. So those RPOs are measured in seconds. And then able to replicate from anything to anything to reduce complexity. Within the Certo architecture, within the Amazon architecture, so installs the same on the target site. It's going to look exactly the same. You'll have your Certo Virtual Manager, you'll have your virtual replication appliances, and you'll have to set up a VPN to VPC to Amazon. And you'll be replicating continuously from production over to S3 storage. The installation on the DR site within Amazon, you'll add a Certo Cloud Appliance. This will include the Certo Virtual Manager, the Certo Virtual Replication Appliance. And as you're replicating, the information is going to be stored in S3 storage buckets. So you will have two continuous costs within an Amazon environment. So one will be the S3 storage, and the second will be the EC2 instance that runs the Certo Cloud Appliance. But you won't be paying for placeholders or shadow VMs on the target site. In the AWS architecture, as well as VMware or Hyper-V, there's a journal that's located on the target site. This is 1 hour up to 14 days worth of data of historical checkpoints so that you can recover to a different point in time, including the ability to recover from like ransomware. So we had a customer a couple years ago who was hit with CryptoLocker twice, which was very unfortunate for them, but using Certo, they were able to effectively recover, and their end users didn't even know that they had been hit with the virus. The unit of replication is a virtual protection group, so we replicate VMs and VMDKs. So this aligns nicely with Maxta, as they also are operating within the hypervisor. So they're looking at VMs also. So you can see there's nice alignment there in the strategy with Certo and Maxta. So a virtual protection group is a group of VMs that makes up an application. So this ensures you have consistency between the VMs, because most of your more complex and mission-critical applications have a database VM, an application VM, a web server VM. You might even have a couple of each of those. So this ensures consistency between those VMs. And the fact that you install the virtual replication appliance on each host, it's going to keep track of those VMs within the environment, so you can move them around as much as you'd like within your Maxta infrastructure. And Certo will say, oh, that guy, even though he was part of this VM and was on this host over here, now he's going to be in a different spot, and that's completely fine for Certo. The journal, so it's small on my screen, so I'm going to bet it's pretty small on yours as well. So this is what the journal looks like in terms of the user interface. So you can see that you have checkpoints every couple of seconds. So as I was created and copied, this is when Certo creates that checkpoint. So that gives you application consistent checkpoints with right order fidelity. We call it kind of internally the TiVo for the environment. So it's kind of a history of everything that's happening. Okay, so I put this slide in because when I do this presentation with the customer, I get the question like, I would like to hear from the customer, not the marketing person, and what the failover looks like, because it really is just a few clicks to failover. It is that easy. So here's what the UI looks like. So you can see it's just an overall picture of health of the environment. The virtual protection groups, each one of those squares represents a group. You can see the status of the VPGs, how many VMs, the storage, the average RPO, and what the compression rate is. So when you want to do a failover, you just slide from test to live failover. It's going to turn red. That's going to let you know this is not a test. You're going to do an actual live failover. Then you select the virtual protection groups that you'd like to failover. Click Next. Set up your policies. So do you want to do reverse protection when you come up? Is there a boot order? Are there any pre and post scripts that need to run? And then that's it, and you're going to start the failover. So it's a very, very simple process. So you can see you can protect any cloud. It's very scalable. The virtual replication and appliance on a per host basis ensures that you can scale. So as you're growing your Maxta environment, Certo will grow right along with it and ensure disaster recovery. A great strategic solution. So if you're looking to go to public cloud and things like that, we can support that. We were also the first Hypervisor-based replication solution announced. So very, very proud of that at VMworld in 2011. And at that show, we actually won Best of Show. So at this point, I will turn it over to Chris.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jennifer. So my name is Chris Darden. I'm a systems engineer here with Maxta. And I'm actually based down in Austin, Texas. And while earlier in the presentation, I noticed it was pointed out that natural disasters are actually one of the least common forms of disaster. I sit here presenting a disaster that are under a tornado watch in Austin. So I found that interesting. All right, and I got control here now, right?
You should have.
There we go. Well, so what I want to do is really provide an overview of Maxta, how the architecture works. We'll go through really the joint solution with Maxta and Certo and how they complement each other very well. I think you'll notice some common themes across the different platforms. And then we'll actually do a demo. So we'll show you a demo of how the two products work together in an actual lab environment, and we'll perform a test failover so you can see what it looks like to use the two solutions together and to do things like test a DR plan, which are a critical element of what most customers are looking for. And so we'll start with who Maxta is at a glance. So at our core, we're a hyper-converged storage platform. And really, when we look at software-defined data centers, especially the hyper-converged form, we see customers come to us with 4 really key things they're looking to achieve by moving away from a traditional architecture. And so flexibility is number 1 on that, and we achieve that in a number of ways that we'll show you, including multi-hypervisor, multiple hardware vendor support, simplicity, so moving the idea away from managing iSCSI volumes or fiber channel zones and moving that to managing VMs. We'll look at scalability, both how we scale out to any size organization requirements and how we scale up. So scaling up things like RAM and disk space and performance within individual nodes. Cost effectiveness being a key attribute to why you would move away from traditional SAN vendors to an environment that leverages commodity hardware and software-defined everything. And so we've been recognized by some of the leading analysts like Gartner and CRN as virtualization leaders and cool vendors to watch. There's a lot of reasons that we'll talk about that. And of course, our funding comes from some of the tier 1 VCs in the Valley. Number 1 being led by Intel Capital. So as you can imagine, that's a strategic partnership and alliance for us for a lot of reasons. We have 0-day support. They want support for things like new processors, things like NVMe technology as they release, and just guidance in the overall market. We'll talk about a few different ways that we go to market, being our software-defined approach, so leverage existing hardware or new hardware, mix and match. But we also have a max deploy appliance approach for customers that want a pre-validated and tested architecture and configuration delivered as a turnkey appliance. And so we'll go through all of these throughout the presentation. So a sample list of customers, really the takeaway here is that we support a wide variety of verticals, from manufacturing to education, oil and gas customers down here in Texas, and we're really designed to sweep the floor of the data center. So a lot of our customers are looking at us to replace their primary SAN infrastructures and run their tier 1 applications. We have some customers that are looking at us to support remote offices or disaster recovery sites, which we'll talk about. We'll call out, Motorola here. Their GPS tracking systems hit Oracle databases that run on Maxta storage software. And Driscoll is a multi-billion-dollar berry company that has chosen to replace a 3-tiered architecture at remote sites with a Maxta solution. And so we'll kind of walk through our technology and how it really meets the needs of a broad range of customers. And so it starts with the difference. So the number one difference that we see, especially in the hyper-converged space, is the idea of choice. So any hardware vendor you choose, you're not locked into it. If you have a mixture of different vendors, that's up to you. And so we optimize for choice across the data center, and we see that as a big differentiator from some of the other vendors out there. The second thing that really sets us apart is agility. So most vendors, especially the ones that are tying you to a particular hardware platform, require a software repurchase when you refresh. And so we have a transferable, perpetual software model that allows you to keep that software and move it along with you as you go through hardware updates on your servers. And the third big differentiator is our application-defined approach to storage. So for most vendors, all apps are treated the same. For Maxta, being a VM-centric and application-centric approach to storage, we're able to optimize things like block size to align with the application page size, number of replicas, whether or not you enable compression or caching. And so we're able to optimize on a per VM basis at the application layer. So how does the Maxta platform work? Well, here we'll kind of walk through the architecture of really what we're doing under the covers. And so you can see at the core is a distributed file system called Maxta File System, where we create an aggregated storage pool leveraging local or direct attached diff to your server hypervisor nodes. So we run our software on a controller VM on the hypervisor. Those controller VMs talk to each other, and they form the aggregated pool of all the disk resources in the cluster and present those up as a global namespace. So with that global namespace, and David, I think I may hear an echo on your end if you want to mute out for a second. Okay. Sorry about that. So with the global namespace, we're able to really build an enterprise resilient storage platform that would mirror what you would expect from an enterprise SAN vendor. So the global namespace gives us the ability to lose any node, any drives, and still maintain availability with no data loss. We'll take advantage of things like enterprise class snapshots and clones, which are metadata based, meaning you can take unlimited numbers of them with no impact to performance across your environment. We'll enable data services like capacity optimization to reduce the overall footprint you need to store your growing data workloads. And then, of course, we enable integrity with checks on processes from end to end using our metadata structure. Also, we have a hybrid flash approach to storage. So we use our SSDs for write-back caching, read caching, and the metadata storage for where we actually lay the blocks down on disk. So we see the performance benefits of solid-state devices with the capacity efficiencies of spinning disk. And then we dynamically auto-tier between that memory and the SSD tiers and the spinning layer. We have the option to wide stripe the data across from the large number of nodes in a data center, or provide data locality. So I can make sure that the data from an individual VM is stored on the same node as the VM itself, while I mirror it to another node for resiliency. Then we talked about the application and storage block size. On the right here, lastly, we have the multi-hypervisor support. And you'll see this grow over time. So we're not locked into any one hypervisor, but if you choose Maxta today, you have the knowledge that you can move to different platforms, whether that be hardware or hypervisor providers down the road. So we'll drill down on this a little bit, our software agility. So we'll compare it to some of the other approaches in the market. The first being the storage array hardware and software vendors that we all know and maybe love. So as you probably all know, the storage vendor will sell a controller-based system with disk trays that will contain the software that provides the functionality like snapshots and replication and just the overall virtualization of the storage. Every 4 to 5 years, when the new platforms come out, typically a repurchase cycle when the software doesn't transfer. So it's a full CapEx expenditure of all the hardware and the software components combined. Some of the other hyper-converged players have brought to market an appliance approach whereby the software is actually tied to the appliance. And what we've seen is this makes the problem even a little worse because now the storage software is tied to the server hardware. So I may replace that more frequently with Intel updates and releases when you're repurchasing that software again when it's time to make the server node updates. So what we've done is we've taken a perpetual software approach that's transferable from different hardware over time so that when you buy the hardware and the software, you're never buying the software again. At that point, all you're purchasing going forward is standard commodity hardware and your software license transfers with you. And so we'll drill down on the application optimized approach too. And so we saw with the traditional storage vendors, there were some benefits to what they could provide, which is really the ability to align things like RAID types and block sizes with the different LUNs that were associated with the applications, but they brought the complexity and the cost associated with it. Hyperconverged players were able to bring the cost down and simplify a little bit of the management, but they give you a uniform pool. It's not one size fits all. You're not able to optimize for particular applications or VMs. And so what we've done at Maxta is really combine the best of both worlds. We bring simplicity to both deploy and manage, bring the overall cost down, but we also give you that granular ability to optimize the policies for each VM and each application. And here's an example through our VM creation wizard, which is part of our GUI. You can go through and create per VM the number of replica copies that you have for that VM. Things like rebuild priority. So if I lose a node, I can determine which VMs get rebuilt first on another node in the cluster. The enabling of striping. So this is that concept of I want a wide stripe and take advantage of multiple nodes in the controllers and CPU associated, or do I want to maintain data locality and vertically stripe? You can also do things like set node affinity groups. So I can have different affinity groups based on different tiers of servers I have in the data center, and then I can assign a VM to a particular affinity group based on the VM tier. And then also when I create vDisks and assign them to these VMs, I can enable, disable compression, recaching, etc. For whatever makes the most sense for that application. So the other thing that was thought about and solved for is the idea that if I'm adding a lot of different vendors into a solution, whether that be the server vendor, the vendor, Hypervisor itself, Maxta, we wanted to provide a single point of contact and collaborative support model so that our customers don't have to worry about finger pointing across vendors. We do this by using our Cloud Connect portal, which captures information proactively in the environment and looks out for things that could cause issues. If issues do arise, the customer calls Maxta technical support, and regardless of what the cause of the issue is, we're able to leverage our TSA-Net contract and provide Tier 1 support across all the different components that may make up your data center. So this allows you peace of mind knowing that you won't be moved from vendor to vendor looking for the problem. So to sum up this portion, we talked about the maximizing the choice across server vendors, hypervisors, and different workloads that you can support with Maxta. We talked about flexibility of having a transferable software license that moves along with you as you update your hardware. We talked about simplicity, and you'll see this in the demo here in a second, of the idea that you can now manage VMs, not storage. Forget about volumes, LUNs, and zoning. And you can also maximize the cost savings. So we're using standard components, and that's the only thing you'll be purchasing going forward. And then we can also capacity optimize to shrink the overall footprint down. So we'll talk about the combined solution. I think you'll see a lot of synergies between the Maxta and the Certo story. So what we've built and what you'll see in the demo is really an environment that customers have been trying to achieve for years. An environment that includes things like N+1 resiliency, efficient enterprise class snapshot encoding capabilities, efficient ways to replicate to secondary data centers and test failovers. And typically all of those things required complex SANs and SAN-based software to achieve. And so what we've built is a platform that can leverage industry standard servers. In the demo environment, you'll see I've got 3 on each side. There's no SAN, there's no NAS involved. It's a software-only solution that runs as a Maxta controller VM on each host, alongside the Certo virtual replication appliance on each host. This creates a storage pool that provides all the enterprise class data services, and you'll see the Certo replication software provides functionality of automating and testing failovers. So the combined solution is one of the most powerful enterprise class data centers you can build, and it's all based on software that runs up to hypervisor level. And we've seen a few different deployment scenarios of where it makes sense to combine the Maxta and the Certo solution. Number one being a client that's established Maxta as their storage platform on both their primary and their secondary data centers. Certo seamlessly integrates and replicates those between them. We've also seen scenarios where customers have deployed Maxta on their primary data center, and maybe they've got some secondary third-party storage hardware that they've repurposed at their DR site. Certo has no problem replicating between those and providing failover capabilities. And the third deployment scenario is maybe a customer's made recent investments in primary data center storage, and they want to have a more cost-effective way to implement DR. So they've leveraged maybe existing server investments with Maxta running as a storage layer and Certo replicating between the two. So very flexible in the deployment approaches. All right, so now we'll go shift over into the demo environment, and I'll walk through an actual demo of how this works.
So here we are in our vSphere web client that shows us a view of our 2 sites for this demo. Our production data center in San Francisco at the bottom contains 15 virtual machines, 5 of them are powered on, and our disaster recovery site is in Boston at the top. Let's take a minute to review what the infrastructure looks like for this demo. The hardware at each site is simply 3 x86 server nodes. Both Maxta and Certo are hardware agnostic, so they could be the vendor of your choice. There's no physical SAN or physical replication appliances needed. The intelligence of the solution is built into the Maxta and Certo software solutions that are running at the hypervisor layer. You can see that each site contains 3 Maxta controller VMs and 3 Certo virtual replication appliances, 1 for each node. When I select an individual node of the cluster, you can see that I have a mixture of hard disk drives for capacity and solid-state drives for caching and metadata. I have 2 virtual switches, one for my virtual machine traffic and one for my Maxta storage network. And finally, the Maxta demo data store is an aggregate of all the disks in the cluster that Maxta presents up to the hosts using NFS. Now here in the Certo dashboard, you can see we have created 1 virtual protection group that includes 5 virtual machines with 1 terabyte of protected capacity from our San Francisco data center. We'll demonstrate a test failover to the secondary data center running on the Maxta storage platform. First, we'll select the virtual protection group that we're going to test. Now we validate the execution parameters that we have defined. Then finally, we will start the failover tests of the virtual protection group to the Boston data center. Here you can see the progress of the failover test running in the taskbar. This will take only a few minutes to complete for this virtual protection group. Now we'll jump back over to our vSphere web client. And after a quick refresh, we can see that 5 test virtual machines from our Maxta virtual protection group have been created by Certo and added to the Boston disaster recovery cluster in the Maxta data store. When I open up recent tasks, we see that Certo is performing the virtual machine reconfiguration. Certo is following policies outlined in the execution parameters that include things like network reconfiguration, boot order, time between boots, etc. Now that we see Certo has successfully completed the tasks in the Certo dashboard, when we switch over to vCenter, we see that all tasks are successfully completed in the clusters. Now that Certo has successfully completed the test failover, we will select one of the VMs from the virtual protection group at the DR side, and we can see that the VM is running Windows Server 2008 and has successfully booted up. We can also see that the VM is running from the Maxta data store at the remote side. We'll now open up the Maxta web interface called MX Insight. MX Insight provides both real-time and historical reporting on critical elements across the cluster. We can click on Manage VMs to see that the 5 VMs for failover testing have in fact been added to the Maxta storage pool at the disaster recovery side.
Hopefully through this process you've seen the complementary elements of a solution. Together, between the two platforms, we provide a truly VM-aware solution that runs at the hypervisor level, that doesn't rely on things like volumes or LUNs or storage software that's tied to any storage platforms. We provide Tier 1 enterprise class services both for the storage as well as the business continuity services. Everything we do is now at an application level from Maxta as well as from Certo using protection groups. Put together a scalable software-only solution in the modern data set. We also together provide now a simple and cost-effective ability for organizations of any size to achieve business continuity. With that, I'll turn it back over to David to go over some Q&A. Appreciate everyone's time.
Excellent presentation. Thanks so much, Chris, and thank you, Jennifer. Before we jump into our Q&A session and give away our prize for this event, I've got a couple quick poll questions here for you about disaster recovery. The first one's an easy yes or no. Do you have a current DR plan in place? You saw the poll statistic that I showed earlier, the event, where only about half of the companies had a failover solution, as that was described. A DR plan, of course, is a little higher level, more generic. Looks like most of the audience has voted, and looks like most of the audience has a disaster recovery plan of some kind in place. So kudos to you for that. Let's go ahead and let me ask the final question here. That is, do you plan to address disaster recovery in 2016? Of course, for those who already have a DR plan in place, you can choose the first option there. But for the 29% of you out there who did not have a DR plan in place, are you looking for new DR solutions? Or even for the 70% roughly that had a DR plan in place, you might be looking to improve your existing disaster recovery plan. Maybe the plan today is to use a hardware-based SAN replication, and maybe you can only afford that for just a few select applications or virtual machines. So, if you're looking for new DR solutions, go ahead and say yes to that question as well. So let me go ahead and close those poll results. And with that, I'd like to announce the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card, and that is Jim Lamon. Congratulations, Jim. We'll contact you via email after the event to deliver your gift card. And before we jump into Q&A, I want to make one last point here, and that is to make sure you check out the handouts in the GoToWebinar control panel there. You will find the free PDF ebook on hyper-convergence fundamentals that actually I wrote. So I can tell you, honestly, it's a very good book. You'll also find some great handouts there from Certo and from Maxta talking about their solutions, how they work together to achieve disaster recovery in a box. So I encourage you to check those out. And with that, we have about 14 minutes left in our time slot here to answer your questions. So we've got a lot of great questions here from the audience. Go ahead and use the GoToWebinar control panel to enter your questions. And while we're answering those questions, I'll leave this up on the screen. If you'd like more information about Certo or Maxta, their websites are there on the screen for you to check out. So with that, let me go ahead and jump into the first question here from the audience. And that is easy one here. Is there a demo version of the software available through a reseller or through Certo or Maxta? I guess, Jennifer, I'll hand that one off to you first.
Yep, so we, if you actually go to our website, we have the ability to get a free trial of Certo. So you can just go to the website that David has up on the screen, click a button in the upper right, and you'll be off and running. Okay,
excellent. And Chris, what's the best way for someone to try out Maxta in their own environment?
Yeah, certainly. So you can contact us through our website as well. There's a chat that pops up, email sales@maxsta.com, and we're happy to provide a kind of a proof of concept option. We also provide cloud-based proof of concepts for customers that want to try out the software in our cloud systems. So contact us and we can talk about the best way to make that happen.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I'll go ahead and answer one of the questions out here. They're talking about, they're asking, whether these are software solutions or hardware solutions. And I know firsthand from working with them, both Certo and Maxta are all software-only solutions. And so you have great flexibility in the underlying hardware. Another question here is about, what's the pricing structure for Certo? Jennifer?
Yep, so we price by protected virtual machine. So we have $745 per protected VM plus maintenance. So we have a base package of 15 VMs with 1 year of maintenance. It comes into right around $14,000, and then we do have price breaks like in what we call Z-packs. So at 25 VMs, you get a little bit of a discount. 100 VMs, 250, and I don't remember the size after that. One thing I did forget to mention at the conclusion of my part of the presentation is if you want to email me, feel free to email me directly as well with questions. It's very easy. It's just jennifer@zerto.com. In case we don't get to your question right now.
Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of questions, so that may be the case. If we don't get to your question, feel free to email Jennifer directly about Certo questions. And Jennifer, while I have you there are some questions out here about quality of service and kind of throttling of the replication traffic. How does Certo handle that?
So yeah, so when you're setting up the virtual protection groups, you can set up how you want the bandwidth throttles. So you can say the minimum that's required is 5 megabits per second. So you can say during working hours, give it 5 or 10 megabits per second, and then maybe 6 p.m. to 8 a.m., give it kind of free reign in terms of the bandwidth. So you can put in some measurements like that. In terms of quality of service, David, do you have anything more specific? I guess I'm not sure. When you mention quality of service, it can be a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, I think that answers the question. If they have, more detailed questions, they can email you. And is it true that you can replicate virtual machines from disparate types of storage, I guess I could say? So, for example, if they had Maxta on one side at one data center, and they had, a traditional or maybe locally attached storage at another data center, say their DR site, is that possible with Certo to replicate between those two?
Yeah, the only requirement for us is the hypervisor, so the underlying storage can be anything, and I think that's what makes the partnership with Maxta so great, is that they're really open to you they say, you don't have to replace it with all Maxta at once, because that might not be possible, so you start slow and then roll it out in your data center. And, you don't hear that message from too many storage vendors, so I think that's why Maxta is really one of the more progressive ones we see today.
Great, great. Yeah, so if they didn't have a DR site right now, maybe they wanted to start one up, they could maybe start with Maxta at DR and then replicate with Zerto, and then maybe at some point move Maxta into production, or vice versa. A lot of flexibility there. Chris, let me ask you about what are the requirements to use Maxta? In terms of hypervisor and the underlying hardware.
Sure. And could you mute out your computer audio?
Yeah.
I think you just did that. Okay. So right now, we support hypervisors of VMware, of course, KVM, and then OpenStack built on KVM, and that'll continue to increase. From a hardware standpoint, today really the minimum that you'll need is 3 server nodes per site. So if you have one site, it would be 3 nodes. You could have 2 of those providing compute and storage capabilities, while one of them could be compute only. So that could be a common deployment of like a remote office, for example. And then the server nodes themselves, we're going to consume 4 CPUs or 4 cores on the Maxta controller VM and 20 gigs of RAM. And then you'll have at least 1 SSD and at least 4 spinning disks per node and 4 spinning disks per cluster. Everything is pretty straightforward, right? We have out on the website. We can provide that if you contact us, but that's going to be the minimum from the hypervisor or the hardware.
Okay. And Chris, how is Maxta packaged and priced?
Yeah, so it's software only, as we talked about, and so our traditional pricing model is based on the capacity of the environment of the cluster and the core count. So it's a combination of looking at the total compute across cores in the environment and the total capacity that you're running in your cluster, and then of course with the support on top of that. The other thing to again point out is that's a one-time cost on the capacity and the compute side, because it is a perpetual license. Then you would just maintain support going forward.
Okay. And what's is there a capacity limitation? Some people are asking about, well, what about, if I want to run large, applications, demanding applications, VDI and things like that, is that a good fit for Maxta?
Yeah, I mean, so the idea behind really the hyper-converged story is that we can scale out compute and storage really in a linear fashion, or in a fashion. So it goes into the flexibility of the story. So we're really limited by the hypervisor in terms of how we can scale. So in VMware's world, that's 64 nodes in a cluster, and so we would look at the environment, the total capacity, and the performance, and then we would architect a solution out to meet both of those needs by increasing the number of nodes, the number of disks, the number of solid-state drives to hit the capacity and the performance numbers that you're trying to achieve.
Okay, excellent. Jennifer, there's a question here for you about Zerto. It's asking, is it customizable based on the number of checkpoints that a VM, number of checkpoints taken of a VM for RPO?
Yeah, so I think this person's thinking of a snapshot, because snapshots use schedule. So Zerto doesn't use snapshots. It's continuous block level replication. So as I/O is created, that's how often we're going to replicate. So if you're seeing replication every couple seconds, that's how often it's happening. Most of our customers, they'll set up alerts, like if they need a 20-second RPO, so you'll get an alert saying, oh, you're at 25 seconds, is something happening in the environment or things like that. But it's not scheduled, because we create a checkpoint with I/O as I/O is created within the environment.
Okay, so Zerto does it not use VADP and change block tracking in vSphere?
No. So it's our own, the virtual replication appliance captures the I/O before it leaves the hypervisor. So we have our own replication method that we have.
Very nice. So it works different than traditional like VMware backup technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then there's another question here. I think what they're asking essentially is, like, what's the failover process when, say, there is a failure? Does the primary virtual machine get shut down is the question, and then what about failback?
Yeah, so well, say your main data center, the production data center went down. So a lot of customers ask, well, how do I access Certo? So you can still dial into Certo from the DR site and execute the failover that way, because we have a web client that you can access from anywhere. So you'll do the failover process as I showed kind of through the slides. So you're just going to select an actual failover. You'll select the VMs that you want to, virtual protection groups rather, that you want to fail over. You can just check the box at the top of the list for an entire site. We do have a commit before rollback feature. So with other DR solutions, once you start failover, it immediately starts shutting down production. And if something was wrong at the DR site, like a network wasn't up and running or something happened there, then you're down in both sites and you're kind of in trouble. So with Certo, we said, okay, we're going to start the failover process, but don't shut down production for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you want to decide, so that you can make sure that, okay, so this is working, the failover is taking place on the target site, the networking and everything is configured and up and running properly. So then in 15 minutes or so, it'll start shutting down production. There's also a checkbox when you fail over. I didn't highlight it because the text was so small in the demo, but there's a checkbox that you can say for reverse protection. So what that means is when production is back up for my DR site, start replicating the changes that have occurred for however long I've been running on the DR site, replicate those back to production. And then the failback process is the same thing in reverse. It's just, 3 or 4 clicks, and then you can fail over everything onto the target site. And because we've set all that up, the boot order, the re-IP, so you can re-IP on failover, and all those things, you're back up and running in a matter of minutes. So I have a customer who fails over 600 VMs, 125 terabytes of data, and everything's up and running in about 20 to 25 minutes.
Wow, very impressive. One of the questions here actually is around that. They ask, what's the best RTO, RPO that can be achieved? I know that might be difficult to put a number on.
Yeah, so it's hard because everyone's environment is different. So if you have, 2 VMs that are not exceeding a whole lot of I/O, then yeah, the RPO is going to be seconds. The customer that I was mentioning, so it was Premier. They've actually done a press release with us, and they sent me a picture of their user interface. So his RPO, it's funny, in this screenshot, it was 10 seconds across the 600 VMs. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And he said, actually, that's a bad day. It's normally around 7 seconds. I bet if I waited 10 minutes, it would have got back down to 7 seconds. So most of our customers see single-digit seconds. Even the customer that's replicating from Boston to London, he sees like an 18-second RPO, and then the RTO is minutes. So that customer with the 600 VMs, 125 terabytes of storage, like I said, 20 to 25 minutes. And the only reason why it takes so long is because their application team goes through and does some QA for them. We have non-disrupted disaster recovery testing, so you can execute tests again and again and again in a sandbox environment, and then you'll know exactly what your RTO is going to be. Is it going to be 2 minutes? Is it going to be 3 minutes? Should I put certain VPGs before others so you can optimize your RTO? So you can have the opportunity to play with that.
Okay, awesome. And Chris, I guess we just have about 1 minute left here. I think the final question will be for you. I see a number of different questions out here. I think they're trying to compare Maxta's, software-defined storage solution to other solutions that they might be familiar with. And so, the best way I can rephrase the question is, how does Maxta? What sort of advanced features does Maxta offer? That traditional storage admins are looking for, deduplication, high availability, support for all the vSphere, advanced features, vMotion, HA, DRS. What does Maxta offer in terms of storage functionality?
Sure. So yeah, in a Maxta environment, all of the standard VMware features that you would have in your licensing would still exist. So vMotion, HA, DRS, storage DRS, all that still would be functional. Again, we're just presenting up to those hosts as an NFS storage pool. And so under the covers, from the feature set, we're doing things like advanced cloning and snapshotting. So we use metadata for that, which means it's zero impact. We're not creating vSparse disks, right, and having big performance hits. If you create a lot of snaps, you can create thousands without impact for test and development, etc. Same thing for clones. We're also doing advanced compression. we're able to compress really on a variable scale, a 4K block, anywhere from a 0.1K block to a 3.5K block, versus some of the other vendors that are only going from a 4 to a 2. So that's why we see really strong compression, which is in line when the data hits our spinning disk. On top of that, we're thin provisioning everything. And then, of course, the resiliency factors come in with our replicate copies. So every block of data has a mirrored block somewhere else in the cluster, so you can withstand any node or disk failure. So you have all the same benefits that you would have in an enterprise-class SAN, with maybe even some extras. And now we're simplifying the management by taking out the storage volumes and managing only the VM.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I think we've reached the end of the webinar now. We do have, again, a great handout in GoToWebinar there. You can download entitled Disaster Recovery in a Box that talks about the Certo and Maxta joint solution. So I encourage you to check that out. Jennifer and Chris, excellent presentations today. Thanks for joining us. And thanks everyone out there who took time out of their busy day to join us for this webinar. For more information, visit Zyrto.com and Maxsta.com. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.